Hi, guys. So it's been a while since we had a podcast, and every time I do a podcast, I stop and restart the first like 10 minutes over and over again because I feel I sound fake and I can't get into like this authentic, like, oh, I'm just having a conversation with you guys mode until like 10 or 15 minutes in. So I've actually restarted it like 10 times. But I know that this podcast was supposed to be about love, but I decided to make it an update on my healing process because I had a breakthrough in that recently, and I wanted to share with you guys some of the things that I learned because I feel that like it was very altering and maybe it can help you guys. And I thought that it would be a good segue anyway into my next podcast about love. So here we go. One of the things that I want you guys to know about podcasts is that part of the reason, well, the main reason why I started it is because I wanted to share with you guys some of the struggles, many of the struggles that I had personally, and I wanted to be open and share my experience and my journey of healing because I feel that there's so many things that we all experience, but nobody ever talks about. And this is part of what I want to do with the podcast is talk about those things that everyone struggles with, but nobody wants to talk about because it's really scary to be vulnerable and to open yourself and to share your truth. And I've been doing that more or less through my platform for a very long time, but podcast just took it to a whole nother level. And I have no regrets. And I know that I'm being judged and I know that people have opinions, but I really don't care because I'm doing it for me. And I know that that sounds really weird, but yeah, I actually am doing this for me. I started this program for me. I started the podcast for me. And it's part of my journey and of healing that has been a huge help. So, anyway, thank you for listening, for those of you who follow me. And yeah, so let's get started. Basically, I found a therapist. So, I've been looking for a long time, like basically since, you know, my breakup, but in June of last year, but I just didn't find someone because it's hard to find someone who's a good match for you. I mean, there's so many therapists, especially in New York City, and you can't really know until you've had a few sessions. So it's just kind of like a financial commitment, a huge financial commitment. So I just haven't found anyone, and I recently did. And I promise I'm not going to gatekeep. I will share with you who that is. But after I have a few more sessions, just because I just started and I'm not 100% sure yet that will continue. But the first session that I had with this person was altering in a major way. So, anyways, for those of you who are not up to date on what the hell is going on with me in my personal life, that's totally fine because why should you why should you care? But if you're interested to know, you should watch the first three podcasts, so it kind of makes more sense what I'm about to say. Um, Only because I don't want to repeat that story over and over again in detail, you know? So the first three podcasts, like, or the first podcast actually, even, no, the first three, has to watch the first three. So anyway, I really have healed to I was telling my partner this the other day, but I felt like I really have been productive in my healing process. Like I'm a hyper productive person in general, and I feel like I treated my healing process the exact same way that I treat any endeavor in my life, which probably isn't the most healthy, but it is what it is. And so anywho, I've been quite efficient, you know, like a lot of you, in a nutshell, a lot of you know that my first months with my new partner were really tough internally, nothing to do with him and between us, but just because I was trying to heal as quickly as I could from my last relationship, which ended in a very traumatic way. And I couldn't, I couldn't let my anger and my frustration and my sadness and my anxiety affect my new partnership. So I was really sort of booking it in the healing journey, you know? I was like, on my own ass about it. And anyway, so not long after actually I met my partner, I already was at the point where, you know, I had healed to the point where I really didn't want to go back. Like if my ex was begging me at my door, like, please come back. Can we do this again? Can we try one more time? The dancing thing or the marriage thing or whatever. It was a hard no, like from me. And that I was clear about quite early on. And it's one of the reasons why I got together with my new partners, because I was dead set clear on that. And I spent a long time diving deep inside myself to ask myself, like, is this really what uh is this really where I'm at, and is this really what I want? But, you know, I was still really stuck on certain things. Um, like for example, my ex and his new partner, we practice in the same studio every single day. We have the same teachers. We go to the same group classes. We do the same rounds. You know, I see them every day, so that's very, very difficult. But, you know, I was so, so happy with my new partner. I am so happy with my new partner. We're doing so good, and I'm growing so much, and I'm so in love. And it's like, I couldn't understand why I was still so triggered by those two people, but not like in a way of, oh, you know, when I watch him with her, I wish I was back with him, or not like that, but actually just sort of like trying to follow what they're doing in their dancing, how they're doing in their dancing, what results they're getting. Like it was very much dance oriented. And interestingly, I was a lot more triggered than by her than by him. And like I just couldn't get it. Like I'll just be straightforward and honest, but like for example, my worst days emotionally were the days where they would go and compete or something, you know, and um I would be like following the results. Like I know this is so, I'm like, should I really be saying this out loud? Because it's really embarrassing, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to say this because I'm sure that other people do the same thing and other people struggle in the same way. But yeah, I would be like sitting in the bathroom, hiding on my phone, like reloading the results page to see how they did, you know? Like even when I'm with my partner or something, I'll be like trying to do that on the side secretly. And I've told him all of this stuff. Like we had a long talk after my therapy session about it. So, but yeah, it was just really unhealthy. Like I would stalk them on Instagram, like through a different account. I mean, it was just, it's bad, right? Like, and I couldn't figure out why. And I couldn't figure out why it was so oriented to dancing and why it was more triggered by her. I was more triggered by her than him. Like I just didn't get it, you know? I'm like, why am I even comparing myself to her? Like she's our student. Like it just didn't make any sense to me. And I couldn't talk about it with anyone. Like I couldn't talk about it with my partner because I didn't know why. And so I just knew that talking about it would just trigger him. Like he's not a therapist. He's not going to help me figure it out, right? I couldn't really talk to our coaches about it because, and or anyone else, because honestly, no one really cares that much, you know? Like maybe I could talk to my mom, but she's not in dancing. But like other people, they don't really care. It's been like 6 months. Like, you know, most people are like, Jess, move on, you know? And in a way, I felt the same. I was like, it's time, it's moving. Well, I'm trying to move on, you know? Like, what is going on? Anyway, so then I sought this therapist, and he's actually in the dance world himself. So it was really easy to communicate. Some of you probably already guessed who it is. But anyway, so I was talking and talking and talking, and I was in tears. And that was really funny because the last time I had a lesson with him 9 years ago at Dutch Open, I also spent my whole lesson in tears, and he actually remembers. And so it was like, we were just laughing that it was full cycle. But anyway, and after talking, 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 he was like, you know, it seems to me that you have put your dancing together with your identity, like completely merged together, those two things, but they are separate things. And he was like, you know that you are who you are, you're not what you do. And I was like, oh. And he was like, you know, when you do a hip twist badly, you probably think that you're just bad, like inherently as a person. And I was like, yes. I mean, it was kind of hard to admit that, but it's true. I really take it so personally how my dancing is doing and how other people affirm my dancing through my results and all of that. Like I'm quite honest about that. But I never thought that it was a bad thing, because it's kind of like I thought, okay, well, I'm an artist and my life is my art and I'm a dancer, that's who I am. And but he was like, there you have so many internal qualities that have nothing to do with dancing, and they're not going to change whether your hip twist is bad or good, whether you get a good result or a bad result, whether your partner chooses you or someone else. He's like, those internal qualities that are so wonderful about you, they're never going to change. And he's like, I think you have an identity crisis going on here. And I was like, oh my God, I think you're right. Because honestly, you know, I think that that's an identity crisis is probably one of the worst mental crises you can have because it's about who you are, and the what I realized is that the reason why I'm still so triggered by them sometimes is because I'm still struggling to find my identity post this breakup. And I think that maybe I always had a little bit of trouble because my identity, and some of you guys know this from previous podcasts, but it was always reliant upon what it is that I achieved, how well I could do something. Like ever since I was young, like my parents, I told you guys, like never told me that you are good because you are very cute. My partner told me this morning that one of the things that I love about you that has nothing to do with dancing is that you're really cute. And I'm like, oh. And yeah, my parents never told me you're good because you are sweet. You're good because you're really kind to animal. I love animals. Like I love all animals. They never said like you're really good because you can be silly and make us laugh. So they never commended or affirmed my internal qualities so much as like, oh, good, good, you're good. You did really well in your piano competition and your opal competition and your art class and your Chinese class and your Kumon math class and blah, 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 blah. It was all external achievement oriented affirmation. And so who I was couldn't be separated from what I was doing and how well I was doing it. So maybe I always had like an identity issue, but when I met my ex, like you guys know, I fell in love immediately. It was like a fairy tale, and we were dancing together and got married very quickly after we met. And it was kind of like suddenly I had an identity because of him. Like next to him, I was the loved and cherished beautiful, Asian, exotic, like sensual, feminine, graceful, elegant wife. Like that was my identity. And it was so like a strong identity. It's kind of like my ex-partner and I, we had a really clear brand in our dance couple. And that brand became my identity and it couldn't be separated from him. Like even from a physical dancing perspective, like that's what we were going for, like this man-woman thing in a very like he's sort of the frame, I'm the picture. Like anyway, and I found my identity and I was so sort of comfortable in that identity because obviously I'm much more than those things that I just listed, but I really relied on those things to feel like I was good enough, and those things were like inherently from our partnership, like he became my identity. And so when he broke up with me, I felt like I lost my identity. And then there was this girl, his partner now, that like looked so much like me. It was like my mini me. And even though she dances a little bit different, like she's still, she was trained by me and like him, and there are a lot of similarities. And I felt like she stole my identity. And suddenly she was the person that I was. And I think that's why I'm so triggered. And when I watch them shine, it's not because, oh, he hurt me and I'm still angry about that he was betrayed me, or like I'm still so angry that she didn't tell me. Like, it's not about that at all. I've moved way past that already. It's because I'm still struggling to find my identity post breakup, you know? My new partner, who like, who I love, you know, more than I've ever loved anyone. And he's very different from my ex. And he's a different dancer, he's a different body, he's a different personality, he's a different age, like everything is different. And it I knew from the very beginning that I did not want to recreate the same experience that I had with my ex. I did not want to create the same brand. I did not want to go for the same things. I did not want him, you know, and I knew that from the very beginning very, very strongly. And that's another reason why this relationship is so healthy, is because I didn't want him to replace my ex. And I knew that I would grow so much by finding and developing my new identity with him. And I think I've done it, you know, to a certain degree, more than I ever thought I could. You know, a lot of you guys have said, like, oh, wow, you really look so different in your dancing, and in a good way. And part of the reason why I've been able to grow is because I didn't want him to change. I just want him to be exactly the way he is, and I want to evolve. And so, but still it's difficult, you know, because finding my identity, trying to figure out who I want to be, really, you know, that's no easy task. And but yeah, this is sort of like what I figured out from recently, is that it's actually not so much my perfectionism and control. Like, you know, I've talked to you about my inner child. Like, my inner child is afraid of making mistakes, so I'm really a perfectionist and over controlling and all that stuff, which I've worked on a lot. But that's not actually the full story. Like, this therapist helped me realize a missing link, which has to do with identity. Because like I said, if I do a hip twist badly, you know, that's tied to my identity, and I feel like I'm bad. And that's why I have to make that hip twist perfect. That's where the perfectionism comes from. It's coming from a fear that I don't have an identity, or that I've lost my identity, or that I won't find it again as a dancer, you know? And so I guess like what really was so amazing to me is that, well, I've sought help much more than I ever have in my life since my breakup. It's one of the things I learned the most about my breakup, is to my heart broke open and I let everyone in. And that's part of the reason why I started the podcast. And I asked for help, and I said I admitted to myself, which is most important, that I just can't do this by myself. Like, I just can't do it. I need help. And like, time and time again, well, first of all, when I did that, love rushed into my life. That's number one. I don't think I'll ever like forget my whole life, like this period where I was in so much pain, but I opened my heart and so much love rushed in from everyone around me. But also, like, what's amazing is that I just realized that people, when you let them in, they help you to see your blind spots. They help you to realize things that you just can't figure out on your own. I was always very arrogant. You guys know I'm arrogant because I was arrogant because my inner child is really afraid of making mistakes and seeming vulnerable. So I developed an adult defense mechanism of arrogance. And I was like, I can always do it by myself. I'm going to figure it out. I don't need any help. I'm always going to be right when I figure it out. And honestly, I couldn't figure this out without help. I really couldn't. I couldn't figure out my inner child without help from my other therapist, who unfortunately is passing away, which is why I had to find a new one. And yeah, and I guess like if there's any takeaway from this podcast, it's that pro therapy, no, pro biomechanics, of course, but no, it's just that we can't do it by ourselves. We can't do life by ourselves. And there's if I had sought help earlier in my marriage, I think things would have turned out very different. And it's not that we would have stayed together and things would be perfect, but maybe we would have even split up sooner, you know, when, you know, because we both suffered for a long time. maybe that suffering could have been eased in some way, shape, or form, you know? So, yeah, the takeaway is, you know, don't be afraid to open your heart. Like, I think the therapy session went really well because I literally came on camera and tears were streaming already down my face. And it's like when you open yourself to someone, like I just saw him like sit up and like pay attention and just like pour his soul into our interaction too. And this is what humans can do to with each other, to each other when they're open and vulnerable. They just elicit compassion and empathy and love and understanding from each other. And the reason why we are so alone in this world is our own doing, is because we don't, there's nothing that connects human beings more than pain, suffering, vulnerability, and being open, you know? We all suffer, we all go through shit. Like the thing that I'm telling you about with like my identity crisis, um, how I have jealousy and envy, and how I still have pain even after being so happy in a new relationship and after so many months. Like all of these things and much more, I'm sure that all of you experience or have experienced, you know? And yeah, and so, okay, so sorry, I forgot. Um, I'm my therapist basically gave me some things to think about my identity. Like first thing I did was my cat is actually sleeping on it right now. She's sleeping on my baby. Like my therapist was like, why don't you go and do some things that have nothing to do with dancing, and there are things that really remind you of your identity, and you know, you can't judge it because it's hard to judge it and other people can't judge it too. So I was like, okay, well, let me like free draw or something, you know, and like free paint. And because I love to paint, and my identity, very much a part of my identity is like creativity and artistry. Like I love making beautiful things. I love painting, drawing, sculpture, like flower bouquets, like anything that has to do with creating. And so I made this thing yesterday, and on it I have all these like affirmations that have to do with my inner qualities, like I trust the universe, like I'm nurturing, I feel everything, I'm empathetic, I forgive and trust with my whole heart, I'll never give up, like I've big dreams, I'm fiercely protective, I'm spontaneous and never boring, like I'm cute. Um, I'm quick to say sorry. I have the gift of healing. I mean, it's just like endless. I know this sounds like I'm just tooting my own horn, but honestly, I never think about these things. So it's really not tooting my own horn because like this is probably the first time I wrote all of these things down in like my whole life, like my whole life. And anyway, and what's interesting is that when I was painting this, like I realized how judgmental I am. Like every stroke I did, there was like a tiny little voice in my head that was like, this is not gonna look good. Like, you know, if you have to post this, it's not gonna be good. Or whatever. Like and I was shocked. I was like, is this how mean I am to myself? Even with an activity that is like a free activity, you know? I can only imagine how I am in my dancing. And then as soon as I went back to the studio today, I was monitoring the way I was talking to myself. And I was like, yep, I'm a bitch to myself for sure. Like I'm an asshole. Anyway, and yeah, so I was just so things are starting to turn around. And the last thing I wanted to say, because I never really want to make these podcasts too long, because I know you guys like I blabber enough in the classes already. But the last thing I wanted to say was that so about 6 months ago, I met my inner child, right? And there was just this sense of peace that washed over me. I think I said that in a previous podcast. I felt peace like inside myself on a visceral level. After I had this therapy session and realized this identity crisis that I was going through, I felt the same wave of peace wash over me. And so that is kind of, and this was the first day, well, actually yesterday was the first day because I had my therapy session 2 days ago. First day, I didn't feel the impulse to check what they were doing on Instagram. The first day I didn't have the impulse to even like, yeah, to think about like them whatsoever in that way, like, mm, and when you discover the reason for a trigger, the true reason, deep, 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 deep down, you will feel that peace and you will know that you found the answer. You know that you found the truth, right? Like move true. It's about searching for truth. And that's in every realm of my program, like, mind and body. Because honestly, it's like every time I talked to someone before about me being triggered, they were like, well, of course you're triggered. Like, you know, he broke up with you and got together with her and you were betrayed. And of course you're triggered. That's normal. Like, you'll heal with time. But I'm like, no, I don't feel better when I think about this reason because it's not the deep reason, It's not the deep reason. And when people try to comfort me and say, like, why are you triggered by her? Like, you can't even compare yourself to her, like you're so different and you're so, I just couldn't, it didn't make me feel better. Like it didn't help at all. And therefore, I didn't find the truth. And you have to go search for it. It's not easy. You have to be vulnerable. You have to open up. It's really scary. You know, it's not that you have to go on a public podcast and say that you're like a little crazy jealous person, but on some level you have to say that to yourself and maybe to your therapist or to someone who can help because they have expertise or whatever, and yeah, it's quite scary to do that. And but the more you do it, the better you feel about doing it going forward. And so yeah, I struggled a little bit, but in the end I was like, I'm just gonna tell you guys how I really feel about stuff. Anyway, so I will let you guys know when the next podcast is coming out, but I hope that this helped you somehow. Um, Maybe I should also say that it's not just her. Like, I've noticed this about myself ever since I was young. I've always had these girls, like, that I fixated on. And usually these girls and stalked to the end of my life and fixated on and obsessed about and was triggered by. And I think all of these girls, like even ever since I was 6 years old, my cousin Tiffany, right, was that one. And then like when I was in third grade, it was Molly Kuramoto. And then when I was in high school, it was Danica Young. And I can name them all. And there's tons in the dance industry over time too. But I think that I never understood why, because it's like logically, it's like she is she and you are you, right? Focus on yourself. Like, why are you looking over there? And I realize now that it always had to do with this identity thing. Like when somebody else could do something that I couldn't do, and it seemed like they were getting positive affirmation externally from the outside for it, it triggered me because I felt like if I couldn't do it, then I was less of a person than they were. And in the dance world, like, my God, I can only imagine how many people struggle with this. Because, yeah, truth be told, there is room in this world for everyone to shine. But if you're not your true, authentic identity, of course you're not going to shine. And that feels like shit. And you're going to look at someone else who's shining and you're going to, try to copy them. Or, if you know that copying will never work, which most of you in my program know, you're just going to feel bad about yourself. And you're not going to understand why, and so I am going to go and continue to do a bunch of things. Like I'm going to the zoo this week at some point, next week, to like play with the animals because this is part of me, and to do things that are really your identity, that have to do with your identity, and to remember that I am who I am. I am not what I do. I am not how well I do what I do. I am not who I'm with. I am not how well the person I'm with is doing what they do. That's another one, for those of you who, struggle with complaining about your partner, like I did in the past. I'm not who chooses me. This is very important for relationships in general. But anyway, next podcast is going to be about love. I've been collecting in my phone a bunch of notes because because the podcast is about what I wish that I knew before I got married and then divorced, and what my older self would tell my younger self about love. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much. And like every day I think of one more point. So I put the point in my notes, and therefore the podcast will be a very full one. So I'll see you guys soon, and hopefully, this helps, and see if you can do something that nurtures your identity. Oh, sorry, one last thing. I apologize. It's just I don't want to like end this and be like, shit, I should have talked about that. The inner child is very key. It's like foundational because that develops like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. But I guess the reason why I didn't figure out this identity thing is because what happens later in our young adolescence also greatly affects identity. So everything that was happening from like 10 until like 18 years old was affecting this issue of identity crisis. So again, I was not getting affirmations for my internal qualities, just my external, what I could do, etc., and how well I was doing it. So for those of you who have really sort of discovered your inner child and worked on a lot of shadow work, maybe this is another thing that you can think about. Like, who are you? Like, what are some of the things about you that have nothing to do with your career or your achievements, etc. That could be like another way to develop that self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-love. Bye.